Hey, stranger. Thanks for picking up. I heard the strangest thing today, and I couldn't wait to call you and tell you all about it. This is story 141. I'm currently in my first year of college, but when this all happened, I was a sophomore who had just gotten her driver's license. Ever since, it's like my parents suddenly hyper-focused on how little time I spend with my younger siblings. Both girls, so at least that's easy. But you best believe not a day goes by without one of those little brats wanting me to drive them somewhere. When I made the mistake of saying too loudly on the phone that I was going to meet my friends at the skate park to go rollerblading, don't laugh, it's really fun. Of course, my middle sibling, Deborah, wanted to go with. And of course, my mom was insistent that I take her. So I did. We were hanging out at the park to rollerblade, but also to look at the guys that came there to skateboard. Maybe pull off a couple of tricks. You never know. 16, driver's license, the world was my oyster. And sure enough, we did meet some people there. Some boys, some girls. One girl in particular showed up wearing these really old-fashioned roller skates. They were like these metal braces that you clipped onto the bottoms of your shoes. She was wearing boots with hers. I guess they needed a hard sole to clip onto. Nothing else really stuck out about her. She wasn't super shy. She wasn't super outgoing. She had the kind of face that you don't really remember, except in context. Like looking at a picture of all of us snapped that day. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The new girl's name was Fern, like the plant. She said her parents were hippies. She didn't go to our school. When we asked what school she went to, she sort of half smiled and looked at the ground. One of my friends, Stacy, later told me, I think she's homeschooled. Probably embarrassed about it. We shouldn't ask. So we didn't. Instead, we let Fern hang out with us. And she was nice. When my sister finally took a header off of one of the jumps and insisted we had to leave to treat her strawberry jam knees, I hung back a sec to ask Fern if she wanted my phone number. She brightened and dug around in her pockets, but what came out was a pad of paper. Thinking back to what Stacy had said, homeschooled, maybe her parents were super protective, maybe she didn't have a phone. I smiled and I wrote down my number and name for her, then told her to give a call anytime she wanted to come out to the park and I'd see if we could come hang out. And that was really that. I mean, who remembers much of their sophomore year of high school now? Between classes and shifting friend alliances and chores and the unfairness of being the eldest sister and therefore sort of an auxiliary mom for my two younger siblings, I didn't have a lot of time to even think about dating. On the few occasions when I could break away and get over to the skate park, Fern was there. She never called. She never texted. It's like she just showed up when we were there. It was 2 days before spring break officially started. We were in high spirits. Further, there was a bit of a dance, a spring fling, the following night. None of us had a date. We planned to just go as a big group. On the drive there, Stacy brought up Fern, saying it must suck to be homeschooled. After all, what kind of dances would she get to go to? I realized I still didn't have her number, any way of contacting her, and decided right then and there I'd leave it up to fate. If Fern showed up at the skate park that day, then I would invite her to go with us to the spring formal the next day. If she wasn't, it was a sign not to. I talked it over with Stacy and the others. The others were less sure. They really seemed caught up on her being a homeschool kid. And while they didn't out and out say it, there was sort of this insinuation that she might be weird. And then, being next to us, she'll make us look weird. Even Stacy was on the fence. But from the back seat where she was crammed between two of my friends, my middle sister said, "I'd rather look weird than be mean." And for once, that shut my friends up. When we got to the park, fate had decided. There, sitting on a picnic bench, was Fern. But she wasn't alone. The bench was occupied by a group of guys, and like Fern, we didn't recognize any of them. Worse, Fern's posture looked nervous. She was sort of clutching at her thin arms. Her toes were pointed away. Maybe feeling bad about not having her back in the car, Stacy charged right over, plunking herself on the seat between Fern and the boys, making a big show of, "Well, there you are. Gosh, we were hoping you'd be here. How was your classes?" Building a big wall of sound, brick by exclusionary brick. The guys seemed to take the hint and sauntered off, though a couple of them kept casting their eyes back over their shoulders at us. When we asked Fern what had happened, she didn't really want to say, finally admitting, "They just came over. They were just asking me a lot of questions. I didn't know how to answer them." We shrugged and got to skating. At some point, my laces came loose, and I hauled back to the picnic table to re-tie my laces. As I bent, I noticed another shadow fall over my foot. I looked up, and it was one of the boys who had been sitting on the picnic table, the one I'd identified as the ringleader. He smiled at me, plopped himself down, and introduced himself as Devin, and for the next couple of minutes, Devin made me feel like I was the only person in the world. Everything I said he laughed about. He smiled the entire time. He asked me lots of questions, and somehow we got on the topic of the spring dance the next day. He said something flirty like, "Well, surely all of us pretty girls had guys already." And feeling a blush on my cheeks, I corrected him and told him actually we were all going stag, or doe. I'm not sure if it's still stag if you're a girl. He put on this big shocked face and said no way he could let that happen. He rechecked the high school name with me and told me he and his friends would be delighted to join us there. So stunned by how quickly it had progressed, I had said okay. And just as I was getting up, I felt a tug on my sleeve. I looked over, and there was Fern. Fern biting her lip and looking between me and Devin nervously. Devin took the hint and sauntered off again. Fern dropped my sleeve and said, "Just checking, are you okay?" Maybe it was the elation of having a date for the first time in my life, and how easy it had felt. Or maybe it was the delight of spring break coming up, and a week away from school. I told Fern, "Of course, I'm great. In fact," as Devin had reminded me, we had a dance coming up, and I asked Fern then and there if she wanted to roll with us. Fern was ecstatic. She looked so excited I thought she was going to jump up and do jumping jacks in her strange clunky roller skates, but just as quickly as she'd been excited, her face fell, crumpled. She told me she'd love to, but she couldn't. Her parents had some big family plans the next night, and she couldn't get out of them. Besides, she said, with a smile that, with an adult vocabulary, I could call wistful, she figured we'd have more fun without her tagging along. That felt like an absolute gut punch, and I was in such a good mood I refused to let it be ruined. I told her instead, "You know what? Why don't you come over before? You can get ready with us, then go do your family thing. And then when that's over, call me, and we'll come get you, and we'll do a sleepover." She looked at me, her eyes shiny bright, and I realized that there were tears in them. She pressed her lips together firmly into a smile and nodded. The plans were made, and I felt great. The next day, classes were a formality. We learned nothing. The teachers knew better than to try to test us with new theorems or facts when we were all resolutely determined to forget everything we could for the next 12 days. Stacy came over to my house to get ready for the party with me. I had a chance then to tell her about the plans with Fern. Right on cue, knock knock, Fern showed up. Stacy was apologetic to her and insisted on at least doing Fern's hair so that she could have a glamorous updo like we did. And so it was that Fern sat on the floor, cross-legged, with Stacy behind her teasing her hair into a stylish updo, while I pranced about in my new party dress. Stacy mentioned how much she liked me in green, and how Devin would surely like me in it too. This made Fern jolt so hard that Stacy pulled her hands back, afraid she'd burned her with the curling iron. Fern was up in a moment, grasping my arms. "What do you mean? You said you didn't know those boys." I told Fern that it just happened, that we'd gotten to talking, and he said he and his friends were going to be there. Fern pressed her lips together again, only this time she wasn't smiling. She finally shook her head again, up and down, but her eyes remained locked on mine. "Just be careful," is all she said. I didn't know what to say. I looked over at Stacy, who was just as wide-eyed as I felt. Stacy finally forced a giggle and said, "Hey, of course, it's just a dance. It's not like we're getting married." Fern looked at her, then looked at me, and as she started to collect her things, she said, "That's not what I'm worried about." Another hour passed as Stacy and I got ready, and then I drove around to pick up my other friends. We made it to the dance a fashionable 15 minutes late, took pictures in front of some implausible backdrop. I think it was Secrets of the Stars, something planetary based anyway. And then we made it out onto the gym floor. It still smelled like a gym, stale sweat emanating from the mats that had been piled in the corner. It was like there was a layer of Axe and designer imposter perfume layered over the top of it, like paper towels over puke. Still, it was new. It was my first dance, and I was there with my friends. But I felt a little uneasy. I hadn't expected Fern to react the way she did, and I couldn't stop thinking about her wide eyes and her pinched mouth. What had those boys said to her before we'd gotten to the park? As though I had thought them into existence, Stacy said, "Look, there they are." I turned, and in walked Devin. Devin only had 2 of his friends with him that I recognized from the skate park. He was looking around, and when he saw us, his face split into a smile, and he walked right over. No playing hard to get with him. Nervously, I played with my hair, while he complimented my dress. We asked him to dance, and he sort of frowned, saying he wanted to wait for a slow one. But after a minute of standing there awkwardly, and no slow song coming, Stacy insisted that we get out on the floor. Only Devin followed, and he only stuck out there until the first chorus, before he begged off, saying he'd wait for us, wait for a slow song. Then he made this big show of taking my hand and kissing it. On the one hand, it seemed incredibly romantic, but maybe I wasn't old enough for romance yet. His lips felt slimy, and when I pulled my hand away, there was spittle on the back of my hand that glinted in the dim light. Stacy and I resumed dancing for the next 3 songs, all of which were bops, before we finally retired from the dance floor. I found myself going to the other side of the gym. There was just something about Devin, about the way he'd looked at me, about his reluctance to dance at a dance, about that slimy kiss on my hand. It just made the night feel strange, a night that should have been our first dance, and here I was concerned about him. Again, as though my thoughts had summoned him, he and his boys seemed to see us and sauntered over. The song had changed to a slower one, and with a bit of stomach acid, I realized he might be coming over for that slow dance. He wasn't. He wanted something else. Specifically, he wanted me and my friends to follow him outside. Why? He told us that his older brother had pulled up, and his older brother was always good for a beer run, and he thought we could have a much better time back at his house. After all, we were all dressed up for fun. I looked at Stacy, not sure what to say. She looked much more excited at the prospect of something so grown up as sneaking out of a lame high school dance to go drink with the cuties from the skate park. I should have been excited too, but something about it felt wrong. I managed to evade answering his question by instead insisting it was too loud and I needed Stacy to come with me to the bathroom to fix my makeup. I saw a look cross his face, a really ugly one, but it was gone in a flash. He smiled brightly and told us to go right ahead, then leaned into my ear and told me, "I'll be waiting for you outside, princess," before he licked it. He licked my ear. Whew. I half led, half pulled Stacy with me to the bathroom. Our other two friends followed. I was already furiously scrubbing at my ear with a scratchy paper towel as Stacy told the other girls what was up. They were as excited as she was. Was I the only one who felt so strange? Now they were all looking at me, chattering excitedly, saying, "Come on, how often does this happen? None of the guys at school are as cool as Devin." I opened my mouth, not sure how to answer. And there, in the stillness of that moment, I heard my phone go off. When I pulled it out of my purse, I didn't recognize the number. I normally wouldn't answer it, but desperate times, I needed a distraction to get my head together to think. I picked up, fully expecting some telemarketer wanting to speak to me about my car's warranty. Instead, it was Fern. Fern was calling to say that she was all done with her family thing, and her mom could drop her off at my place in 15 minutes. When I tell you I felt relief, I perked up immediately. I know I sounded way overexcited, and told her that was great, and we'd see her in 15. I then got off the phone, looked at Stacy, and reminded her that we already had plans. The other two girls with us seemed put out. Stacy flapped a hand at them. Just as quickly as she had pronounced that this would be the coolest thing we could do all year, she was backtracking madly. Never mind. I mean, could you imagine if we got caught? We don't even know these guys. But you said... But I said nothing. It's because I forgot we have plans with Fern. As we left the bathroom and headed back down the hallway, Stacy leaned into my ear, the same one that Devin had licked, and whispered, "Oh, thank God. I don't know about you, but isn't there something strange about those guys?" Stacy was always that way. I couldn't really keep up with her moods, but she was a good friend. All told, all four of us decided to go back to my house. As we exited the bathroom, we all turned left without a word, walking the long way around the gymnasium to exit through the back door, thus avoiding where Devin and his friends, and presumably his older brother, were waiting. When we pulled up to my house, Fern was already there. She had been chewing on a corner of her lip, but when we pulled up, her eyes got bright. The sleepover was fantastic. I even let my little sister hang out for a while, at least through one movie. My mom soon came to get her and told her that it was her bedtime. Before she left, she turned around and snapped a picture with her phone, in that bratty way that little siblings always do, trying to catch you with your mouth open or something. Then she turned and fled while we all yelled and threw pillows at the doorway where she'd stood. I had thought maybe we'd have a chance to talk to Fern, know a little bit more about her, but she seemed uncomfortable with our questions. She deflected a lot of them back to us, and finally deciding that maybe she just didn't want to talk about it, I put it to rest. We stayed up way too late, putting movies on and not really watching them, painting our toenails the most regrettable colors. Soon, it was only Fern and I awake. As I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a voice. It was Fern. "I'm awfully glad you guys didn't go with them." "What?" I got up, looked over, wanting to ask her if Stacy had told her about Devin showing up, or about his plan. But when my eyes fell on her, I realized that Fern was asleep. The next morning came way early, but Fern was up, dressed, and heading out almost before I woke up. I had to sort of chase after her, telling her it was okay. She could stick around for breakfast. I was sure my mom would do pancakes, something a little more special than the usual cereal. But she shook her head, saying her family always did things on the weekends, and she had to get back. When I offered her a ride, she shook her head again, then leaned in and hugged me hard, telling me, "Thank you so much." And then she was gone. As though Fern leaving had acted as some sort of alarm, all of my friends woke up too, which was strange. We could sleep in until noon after one of our sleepovers. We were sitting down to a breakfast of waffles when I thought to text Fern and make sure she'd gotten home okay. Thankfully, as she'd called me the night before, I finally had her number. I tried to text, but I got an error on my phone, saying I was texting a landline. Stacy had been right. She didn't have a cell phone. So instead, I stepped away from the breakfast table and I hit the call button instead. It rang and rang and rang. No one picked up. Odd. Well, she must have gotten home. Maybe she and her parents were out doing something. I put my phone away, and I didn't think much more about it, figuring I'd see her the next time we went to the skate park. But we didn't. We went nearly every day, different times of the day, and Fern, who had always been there, was never there again. Neither were Devin or his friends. I tried calling her phone again, and it rang for a long time until it picked up. At the other end of the line was a very confused-sounding man. "Hello? Hello? Who is this?" "I'm sorry, is this Fern's dad?" No. The man explained to me that he had been walking out of a restaurant when a payphone next to the bus stop had started to ring, and he'd picked it up out of curiosity. I went by later to confirm. It was the number that Fern had called me from, meaning I didn't actually have a way to get in touch with Fern at all. I drove home, feeling so confused. But when I pulled up, my middle sister was sitting on the steps, holding her rollerblades. I thought about saying no, that I wanted to go inside and maybe search social media for Fern, but I already saw my mom peeking out of the window, giving me that look. Fine, I could look on my phone at the park. I bundled my sister into my car, and we drove. She asked me why I was in such a bad mood, and I told her simply that Fern had my number, but I didn't have hers, only a random payphone that Fern had used one time, and how I hadn't seen her at the park ever since. My sister fiddled with her phone for a bit, and mine dinged in my pocket. "Well, at least you have a picture." That's right, my little sister had taken a picture. When we got to the skate park, she ran off with her skates banging over her shoulder, and I got out, pulling my phone to take a look. And sure enough, there was a picture. Me with my previously fancy updo all coming undone. Stacy, mouth wide open, half-chewed popcorn visible in her cheek. The other two doing some variation of bunny ears. And Fern. 5 girls at a sleepover, all in various states of t-shirt pajamas and action. But as I looked at that picture, there was something that bugged me, something other about Fern. I found myself circling her face with my fingertip as I tried to figure out what was different about Fern. That's what I thought too. I turned and saw my little sister peering over my shoulder. About the flash, her eyes look like Dioge's do. Isn't that weird? I looked down. Dioge was our aging golden retriever, and sure enough, his eyes reflected green-blue in a flash, whereas ours reflected red. And that was it. While I'd been tracing her face, my sister had literally put her finger on it, because Fern's eyes weren't red. They, like Dioge's, reflected white-green. I shrugged. Perhaps it was contacts. Perhaps it was some weird filter that my sister had applied to mess with me. I haven't seen Devin since. Not at the park, or at any school event, including games. I've looked at the other yearbooks. All of our schools have the yearbooks online, and I haven't found Devin or his friends in any of them. And if he wasn't local, where was he planning on taking us that night? More importantly, I never saw Fern again either. I don't know where she came from. I don't know where she went. I don't know how she knew about Devin's plans. But long before I had felt strange, concerned even about Devin, she had. Was I more aware of him because of her? I kind of think yeah. And here I am, with no way to reach out, call her. When it comes to Fern, all I have are questions. And a picture that maybe answers questions that I just haven't thought to ask. But if I had a way to contact her, more than just a payphone phone number, I don't think I would ask. I would just say, thank you. You know, that is the point of making memories when you're young. Parties and game days, all those things that, when you're older, become these sort of cherished memories. But the trick with that is, you have to stick around in order to get older, to be able to look back on those memories at all. Please be careful out there, guys. Not everyone who approaches you with a smile is your friend. I've gotta go. Like, comment, subscribe, notify, or any combination of the above as you deem fit. And I'll talk to you next time. Take care, stranger.